Understanding Supply Chain Part 2. That's what we're going to be talking about this week. Last week we talked about some of the physical processes in the supply chain. This week it's more about the systems and KPIs coming right up. So welcome back. If you're a regular on the channel, you'll know last week we talked about some of the physical aspects of the supply chain, and you can check out that video right up here. This week we are talking about systems and KPIs. Now, this is not going to be sort of a totally comprehensive video. The intention of this video is really to give you a few ideas, tips, that you can look at in your own supply chain, particularly if you're taking on a new role, or maybe you've moved to a new company, you've taken on a new role there, and you want to kind of have a look around and quickly come up to speed on how the supply chain's operating. So these are typically some of the things that I look at when I'm visiting a client for the first time in my consulting business. So if you haven't been on the channel before, my day job is running a consulting company. Okay, so what sort of things do we look at in terms of systems and KPIs? And do feel free to add down below any tips that you've got yourselves. So the sort of things that I look for in terms of the systems are certainly very much looking at starting at the customer end and looking at demand planning, forecasting, because that can be kind of the root of a lot of the problems in a supply chain. So are there formal systems being used, or is it all being done on spreadsheets? Is there proper demand forecasting happening? And of course that can be quite difficult in a lot of industries. I'm just talking with a client at the moment about this very thing, and they kind of have really static demand and then huge sort of bumps in demand, if you like. Others, in FMCG, have sort of steady demand, and then through holiday periods like Christmas and Easter and things, suddenly they have peaks. So the requirements for demand forecasting and of course supply planning going with that are very different between different industries. But most industries need some sort of tool to do that. And so I'm always interested in what tool they're using, how they've got it set up, and what's their forecasting accuracy like, which is really important. It's one thing to have forecasting, but is it accurate? Let's flip to the other end of the supply chain then for a moment. And the sort of flip side of that is supplier management. Are we managing things like supplier performance, adherence, and so on? That's probably one of the areas that a lot of organizations are not so good at. And when we come on to KPIs, I'll mention that again. So supplier management, very important. Some of the key systems that generally businesses or organizations need to have: a WMS, warehouse management system. What kind of functionality has that got? Is it supporting the warehouse operation adequately? Now, there are very basic warehouse management systems which are not that expensive, and there are very expensive warehouse management systems. So just as an example of that, we've just finished a project with a very large pharmaceutical company. We've designed their warehouse for them, and now they're talking about putting in a warehouse management system. They're going for one of the tier 1 warehouse management systems. It's $1 million plus because of all of the functionality that they need in that. And you might be wondering what sort of functionality. Well, things like batch tracking, use by date tracking, multi-temperature control, being able to manage recalls, all of that sort of detailed stuff, which you can imagine is very important in their industry. In a simpler sort of organization, you can get away with obviously a much simpler warehouse management system. But the thing I'm looking for is, do they have one? And does it have the right functionality? Does it really support them in what they need? Another really sort of nuts and bolts element there is transport management. And you may have heard of the term TMS, Transport Management System. These can take all different forms. Very often they are systems that are used by the dispatch staff to select carriers for the outbound orders. So particularly where you've got lots of B2C orders, they'll tap in where it's going, how big the consignment is, and these sort of systems can help them pick which carrier to send it on for the most cost-effective delivery. Other transport management systems, that's more freight management, but transport management systems, pure sort of form, will help you manage your own fleet of trucks. It can be looking at, time utilization, capacity utilization, maintenance, all those sort of things. So they're really important systems. And I suppose tacked onto that, if you have a fleet an in-house fleet that is doing deliveries, another system you might look at is a routing and scheduling system. Depending what part of the world you come from, it might be called routing or routing, but this is the detailed planning of each delivery drop on each vehicle, typically used for multi-drop runs, so where you've got vehicles going out and dropping off at 10, 20, 30 customers. You want to plan that route to make it as efficient as possible. So those are some of the sort of key systems that I'd be looking for. What other systems do you think you'd be looking for if you were starting off in a new organization? Let's talk about KPIs for a minute. And there's loads of videos on the channel here about KPIs. And in fact, I would ask you to look at the ultimate KPI. I think it's the ultimate KPI. It's the probability of a perfect order. And we'll put that link up here. But some of the mistakes that people make in terms of KPIs are probably around having too many. People want to measure all kinds of stuff. And I keep it to 3 or 4 per level of management in the organization. So, the CEO wants to see high-level KPIs, the warehouse manager wants to see more detailed KPIs around warehouse productivity and so on. So match them for the management level in the organization. And some of the key ones that I'd be looking at if I was coming into a business for the first time would certainly be SIFOT. Now, we've all heard of DIFOT. What about SIFOT? Supply in full on time. So I mentioned earlier the importance of managing supplier performance. SIFOT is a really important KPI. So are they delivering in full on time? It's so important because this is the start of your outbound logistics operation, really. You've got product coming in, materials coming in from suppliers. If they're not coming in full on time, you've really got to play catch up all the way through the rest of your operation to get product out to customers. So SIFOT, really important. Everybody knows DIFOT, delivery in full on time, the delivery performance. I'd be looking at other things like order picking accuracy, inventory record accuracy, often referred to as IRA, inventory record accuracy. If when pickers are going to product in the warehouse, the product's not there, how can you hope to have a very high service level? So inventory record accuracy, very important. You need some financial KPIs, things like you might pick cost per case throughput in the warehouse, cost per case throughput, in your supply chain, through your logistics operation, cost per pallet, whatever sort of metric suits you. And then some sort of productivity figure is really good. So in the warehouse, for example, that might be picks per hour. That's going to vary considerably from industry to industry. I've worked with businesses in sort of industrial products and automotive products where you've got, things from door panels to engines to widgets, where 15 to 20 picks an hour is actually quite good because of the nature of the product. In a much more high volume FMCG environment, 150 picks per hour might be normal. So think of that, what industry are you in and what's good in your industry, but some sort of picking performance, warehouse performance KPI is really important as well. So there we go, just some quick thoughts on understanding your supply chain, maybe a new supply chain that you've just started operating in, some of the things to look at. Do share your thoughts down below. What are some of the things that you look for when you're moving into a new organization? And also, if you're new to the channel, do feel free to comment down below on some of the topics that you'd like to hear more about. We've covered most of the topics in this channel over the years, but I'm always interested to hear what you want to hear more about, and we'll try and come up with those videos for you as well. So thanks for watching, and bye for now.